Oh god, this is a lot. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I've been getting some comments are like, oh, I really want to branch out. What fantasy books do you recommend? Because I really do talk about how much I love fantasy as a genre. So first we're gonna get into my little like history with fantasy, but I'm gonna talk about that, and then I have a bunch of recommendations, and I have broken them down into different types of fantasy things. Like especially in these books that I have read, there's different areas of fantasy. So I have romance readers transitioning into fantasy, vibey fantasies, more fantasies focused on world building and like politics, and then I also have character driven fantasies, and then like two other like subcategories of fantasy. First I'm going to talk about what I like in a fantasy and like how I got into fantasy. So I first got into fantasy with the Cruel Prince trilogy. Where is it at? Oh, it's very far down. You just have to take my word for it. I first read The Cruel Prince, like the first book of the trilogy, The Cruel Prince, back in like June 2022. I didn't really like it that much. It was like not like I don't know, like I wasn't like prepared for the world building and everything like that. So it was like really hard to get into, and I didn't really understand the politics. But I kept on going on. I kept trucking on, and I really started to enjoy the last two books of the trilogy. And so when I reread it in January 2023, I was like, wow, how can I not like this? But I think it is an acquired taste to get into, especially because I was reading mostly romance, and a lot of people like The Cruel Prince is very like misconstrued in like the way it's marketed, because like everyone's like talking about Jude and Carden, and yes, I love the relationship so much. It's not focused on Jude and Carden together, and we don't really see Jude and Carden like get along very well until like the third book. I read The Cruel Prince, and then I branched out into I went into the famous Shatter Me series by Tafara Mafi. Looking back, do not remember anything about the Shatter Me series, but I remember really enjoying it when I first read it, and I was like, it was okay. It wasn't like the best, but I wasn't like obsessed. But there was like the third book was really good. I remember Ignite Me. Don't remember what happens in Ignite Me, but I remember giving that 5 stars. Yeah, and then I didn't go into fantasy until I reached Dance of Thieves and Vow of Thieves. It's very in the same realm as The Cruel Prince, where it's like mostly focused on the politics of the world, and so like the relationship was really good, but I would say it's like the subplot. I think the romance in Dance of Thieves and Vow of Thieves is more pushed than the romance between Jude and Carden in The Cruel Prince. And then I went into the typical YA fantasies. So I read the Caraval trilogy, and then I read the Shadow and Bone trilogy, and then that's what I feel like the Shadow and Bone trilogy is where I really like found myself ingrained in the fantasy, because then I read Six of Crows, and that changed like my whole life. So there's that. For things that I look in for a fantasy, I love a good world building. I love like when we're like introduced into this world and I don't have questions. I like when my fantasy can tell me like we're like into a new world. It's not like anything like the real world at all. And like I kind of like it when it's like it like seems like it's medieval. I don't know why. And then I also love a heist. I love a heist in the book. A good romance subplot is really good. I love more romance subplots than like full-on romantasy, which is like a subgenre of fantasy where it's like mostly focused on the romance. If the fantasy's not like high stakes a lot and we're not like doing a bunch of stuff most of the time, I'm gonna get really bored. And if we're just like trucking along on a route and you tell me everything that happens in that like journey of like walking across the desert, I'm not gonna enjoy it. So enough of me talking about what I like in a fantasy. I haven't read a lot of like high fantasy. Like I haven't read Tolkien, which is on my list of what I want to read. But let me give you some recommendations, because I think that's what everyone's here for. The first category of like recommendations are for contemporary romance readers that want to dive into fantasy. First, we have Powerless by Lauren Roberts. This is about a powerless girl, Peyton, and we follow Peyton in this world. Like you have to have a power or else like you're dead. So she's pretending to have a power by being like a psychic, and so she gets thrown into this like Hunger Games-esque like trial thing. So she gets thrown into this. Mind you, she doesn't have a power, and I feel like the main focus is Peyton like trying to like navigate the trials, but I think the romance is what like really like solidified this as like being like such a popular book. This book, I don't think it's enemies to lovers, but like it's very like ropey in that sense, but it's very good. Like I think the banter in this book between Peyton and Kai was really well executed, and so like I think this romance is gonna like the romance of this book is gonna keep you wanting to read this book, so that's perfect for romance readers. Next, we have the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy. It starts with Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. This is set within the Carvel universe, And honestly, I don't think you have to read Caraval to read this trilogy. Like, if you want to read it, read it. I don't think it's necessary. And I honestly didn't like Caraval, so there's that. There's my 2 cents on that. If you read into this, it like tells you like what happens at the end of Caraval. But we follow a character that's introduced in the Caraval trilogy, Jax, and we're following Evangeline. So like it's following them. Jax is a fate. You kind of like get a sense when you're reading it. It's not like too heavy on the world building because it is like very magical and whimsical and fairy tale-esque. We follow Evangeline and she's a girl. She's just a girl and she loves believing in fairy tales. Like she gets roped up into Jax's like fateness, and so she has to do something. And yeah, we just follow Evangeline and Jax and their journey within the world of Caraval. But like, it's not set in Caraval. You get it. Maybe you don't, but just read it and you'll like it. I promise. And then the last romance readers transitioning into fantasy. I don't hear a lot of people talk about this, but it's Between Wrath and Mercy and Between Hope and Despair by Jess Wisecup. I read this probably August. Loved it. Like the romance was so good. I haven't really read a second chance romance within fantasy. This is about Emmeline, and she has a daughter who in this world is like, everyone thinks that daughter is going to be like the chosen one. In her past, she was involved with the prince of like a nation, I guess. And so she had a twin sister that died. Her twin sister and her like boyfriend, basically the prince, they were engaged to be married. And so Emmeline was like, whoa, this is crazy, I have to let go of you. She leaves, she has a kid, and everyone now thinks that her kid is the chosen one. Her kid gets kidnapped, and so she's like, oh my god, I have to join forces with Rain and I have to find my daughter. And so it follows that, and the world building is not crazy. It's not like insane. There's this one goal that we have to do, and we're trying to do that as fast as we can. It's a completed duology, I'm pretty sure. It was really good. The romance between Rain and Emmeline, so good, so good. It's one of the spicier fantasy romances, so it is definitely romantic-y, but it was good in its own right, and I liked it. Next we have, oh god, okay. Next are the vibey fantasies that like are purely for the vibes, basically. I think like the vibe of these fantasies make it so good. First we have The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. This is by V.E. Schwab. I loved The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. It's a very slow story, and it's not like very fantastical in that aspect. It's more like magical realism, like literary fiction. It's not like fantasy, but like the magic area of it is fantastical, so I categorize it as fantasy. We follow Addie, and she makes this deal, and so she basically cannot be remembered by other people or like be in pictures or anything like that. She can't like write her name down. Like, so if you forget Addie LaRue, you just forget Addie LaRue. There's no like documentation of Addie. It follows her life like through different time periods of like meeting different people and like being like basically all alone in this world. I thought it was such a beautiful story. It was so good. I cried so much at the end of it. So that's like a very like character vibey fantasy. Next is A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. The island is Cadence, and Jax and Adarna are the two characters, and they're like kind of like rivals. They didn't get along too much when they were younger. Jax is on the mainland. Jax is coming back because they think that the gods are stealing these little girls in like their like island, and so like these girls are going missing, and they're like, oh my god, are we upsetting the gods because we're not playing music? And so Jax comes back because he's the only bard, and they're like, Jax, you need to play because these girls getting got. So it's a very like folklore area, so it's really like, it's fun to dive into like the world of A River Enchanted. It's very slow. I think it's very mundane in that aspect. It like really talks about like what these different characters do, and I loved it. Next, I have Trust of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. This is a standalone fantasy. It's very Princess Bride. That's how people marketed it. So she has this friend named Charlie. He's leaving off the island. He doesn't come back, and so Tress is like, oh my god, I have to find Charlie. And so it's basically following her journey trying to find Charlie. There's pirates. It's so good. You feel like you're watching a movie. It's just so good. It's funny. It's very atmospheric, so I loved it for that. I don't have any recollection like the books that I do read, so like sometimes I'm like giving elaborate like summaries. Sometimes I don't have elaborate summaries. Next, I have The Dance of Thieves duology by Mary E. Pearson. This is a spin-off of her other novel, The Remnant Chronicles. I haven't read The Remnant Chronicles, but people say you should read the Remnant Chronicles. I don't know. I don't have a stance because I haven't read the Remnant Chronicles, but I read these two by themselves and I love them. I don't know if you have to read it. I think it like really helps with like the world building and like why we're like this, but yeah. We just follow Cassie. The romance in this book, so good, so good. But also the world building is really nice too. Cassie is on the Queen's Guard, and so she goes over to this one area of the land. So she goes over there because there's like suspicious activity, and so she's on the Queen's Guard trying to figure out what it is. And then Jace's family, they're like the unannounced sovereigns of this area of the land, and so they're like, why are you taking our land when it's our land? Like, we were here first. It's like kind of enemies to lovers in that aspect. So her and Jace like don't get along that well, but then they come together, you know what I mean? It's very good. I think the world building is spectacular in this book. Another standalone very atmospheric fantasy is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I really enjoyed this one. Basically we follow Cecilia and I literally have to look at these characters' names. I promise you I've read this book and I really enjoyed it. We follow Cecilia and Marco, and so they're like told from a young age that like you're gonna be in this competition between someone else. They just have to perform their like little magical duties and they have to win the competition. We're not really like told what the competition is and like what the prize is or like what happens. They know that they have to compete, and so it's just a matter of time like whenever that happens. And so we follow them, and their arena for competing is the circus. So they have this traveling circus that is only shown at night, and like it's very elusive, and like you have to get an invitation to come into the circus. We're following Cecilia and Marco and like some other characters within like the circus, and it's very good. The little romance between Cecilia and Marco, I feel like this is what Carvel was trying to do. And then the last vibey fantasy I have for this is The One Dark Window duology by Rachel Gilling. I love this duology because it's very over the garden wall, so it's very like gothic fantasy. We're like in this like misty town. You just have like this like this atmosphere of misty woods. The magic system in this series is so cool. So there's 12 Providence cards, and so if you have a card you get like a certain type of power, and so like each card is like different in that aspect. Because the Kingdom of Blunder is like under this mist, if you get like sick and you get magical powers, the king wants to kill you if you're infected by like this disease. Basically we follow Elspeth, and she is infected. She has like this other like voice in her head, so it's Nightmare. To rid Blunder of this like magical fog mist thing, you have to reunite all 12 Providence cards, but one of the cards, like the one card that they need, is very rare because there's only one card of that one. The cards are just a very nice touch, and it adds to the atmosphere. It adds to like the medieval type of like, it gives me Over the Garden Wall vibes, and if you've watched that cartoon it's really good and it gives me this vibe. So watch that cartoon and then read this book. The next category is more world building and like politics based, but first I have the Throne of Glass series. I have the first one and then the last one. This world is very politics based, but I think the politics makes this world so intriguing because it's so thought out, and like from the first book to the last book everything connects, but it's also connecting in like a different way. Like it feels like two different books. I think everyone knows what this is about, but if you don't, the first book is about Selena, and she's a prisoner in the salt mines, and she gets roped into this competition that the kingdom is holding where the king wants a champion so she can win her freedom out of the salt mines. So yeah, so we follow that, and then it's an 8-book like journey of Selena, including the prequel. And I think the world is so beautifully done. The characters, you get so attached to them. Look at all these tabs I have in the last one. Next I have the Legendborn cycle. This is unfinished. I think there's gonna be 4 in the series, but we follow Bree, and this is YA. We follow Bree, and she's a 16-year-old. She is in like this accelerated like high school classes at UNC Chapel Hill. She's like a 6-year-old in like the college setting. She gets roped into like this like, I don't know, kind of club-ish thing. Like there's like these demons that are like trying to hunt her, and so she's like, well, what is this? So she gets roped in this club, and in this club they're like descendants of King Arthur and like his round table like crew. So it's that, and like the world building's so complicated. It actually is a lot to ingest, and it's very like confusing to understand in the beginning. But I think the world Tracy Deonn has made, the world building is so like intense that it's like so unique in that aspect. I feel like this is one of the most world building reads that I have read, and I loved it. So next, this isn't as world building, it's more politics based, but the politics in is the Cruel Prince trilogy. I just have the collector's edition because I love the book so much. Look at them. Look at them. Oh my god, they're so good. I love them. Okay, the Cruel Prince. They're very short books. They're very easy to digest. We're in this like fae universe. Sometimes fae is a little like hard to like digest because you're not really like given in to like the world building of fae. You're just like, oh yeah, here are the fae. Like every universe has a different like iteration of fae, so it's really crazy. We follow Jude, and she's a human in the fae world. She wants to be a guard, and so like everyone's like, oh, you're a human, you can't really be in the fae, and like the fae don't really like her, and so it's very like that aspect. But yeah, I don't know how to explain it. It's just very politics driven, and like Jude is such a powerhouse, so she gets stuff done. The fae are basically her little puppets. Like she's like pushing them around. I love it. I love it so much. It's just beautifully done. I love it so much. Next, another world building politics based fantasy is We Hunt the Flame duology by Hafsa Faisal. Love this duology. It's so good. Funny story, I got spoiled about what happens because I tried to look up like fan art in the wiki. Don't do that. Please do not do that. But like I was still crying as a baby. Like crying. I was sobbing when I first read this. So it's very good. We follow Saphira, and she's the hunter. It's a cursed forest and she's like navigating that because like she's the hunter. She's trying to like provide for her like community, and she's the one that's like providing the food. The cursed forest is like sweeping everything up in shadow, and so like that's like what like the conflict is, and so they're trying to figure out like have a solution to that. So we follow both like characters, Nasir and Saphira. They're trying to find this lost artifact, and so they're on a journey to find that, to restore and bring magic back to the kingdom and have everyone safe and happy. And the romance is really good too. I loved it. The politics were so good. Very good duology. Characters executed very well as well. And then the last one for this category is Jade City by Fonda Lee. I would put the whole Greenbone saga, but I've only read the first one, which is actually kind of crazy because I really enjoyed it. I just haven't been like inclined to finish it, but I really love Jade City. The magic of this world is also very crazy as well. In this world, jade, like wearing jade, gives you the magical powers, and so it's like basically like kind of like mafia in that way, like different like mafia clans, and so they're fighting, and like the jade is like their power, and like there's like this notion of like wanting to like expand out of their little island nation, Keko, I think that's how you say it, wanting to expand out and like bring jade to other people where they're like, oh, but they're like, it's not like their culture. And like I love like the mafia, like it's like, oh, they're fighting, like what's gonna happen. Really liked it. Jade City is like so like well executed, and like just like the politics in like the world is like so different from like a bunch of these this is actually, is this a problem? Oh my god, I didn't know this was so bad. Like because they're all in like these shelves, so it doesn't look as bad, but like when I bring them out, it's bad. The next category is like character driven fantasy, and I love a character driven fantasy. I love like connecting to the character so much. First, I have the Prison Healer trilogy by Lynette Noni. I love this trilogy. I probably read this August, and it was just like so good. We're like the first book, we're in prison, and we following Kiva. She's in this like death prison where like everyone like knows like you're gonna die in that prison, and she is the prison healer. Like she's like the medic basically. The politics of this was really good too, but I think it's like mostly focused on like the characters and what makes you feel for the characters. The kingdom is like don't recognize this one group as like their leader anymore, so like they're kind of like out, and so that like group are the rebels, and so the rebel queen is like put into the prison, and so she's deathly like she's about to die, and so they're like, oh, you have to perform these little like these trials because like to prove your innocence, and so you can get out of the prison or else you're gonna die in the prison. And so Kiva's like, she's the healer, so she's like, I can't just like let someone about to die do these challenges, so she steps up for the rebel queen. And there's that. A lot of people don't like it, but it's very like tell not show writing, but like it's like so jam-packed with action to me that I was like okay with it. And so like the second and third book of the trilogy are just so much better than the first book, but like the first book is really like the foundation because you can't just jump into the second and third book, but the second and third book are really good. So I urge you guys to keep on going with this series. It isn't the most groundbreaking series ever, but like the characters are so rich and so good that by the third book I was sobbing. Next, I have An Ember in the Ashes by Sabar Tahir. This series, so good. These books, massive. So floppy as well. Like in this Marshall Empire, but like Lila and her family, they're not rocking with the Marshall Empire, but like it's not like anything crazy happened. Something crazy happens to Lila. Lila's brother's arrested for treason. She is trying to like get her brother back. So basically she goes undercover in the Marshall Empire as like a servant for the commandant. And like this commandant, crazy strict. Like everyone's terrified of her. I'm terrified of her. Like she's not a good person. And then there's a little romance in here. You meet other characters. These characters are just so good. Guys, let's be for real. First book was really good. Second book, not the best. I think it's the worst out of the series, but you have to push through the second book to get to the third and fourth book, which are so amazing. These books, so good. Cried so much in the last one. You feel so much for these characters when you like get into it. So I think it's all worth it in the end. But like the second book, a little snooze fest. Follow Lila, Elias, and this other character, Helen. Loved Helen. I didn't like her at first, but I love Helen. So check it out what you will. I think the characters are just so good. And I honestly like think the characters make the story a little bit better than like the actual politics and like the actual world. Because the world's not the craziest. It's not like my favorite world to ever be in. But I love these characters so much. It's worth it to me. Next is the Atlas 6 trilogy. Follow 6 different characters. And so they're all like hand-picked to be in this Alexandrian society. Society is very elusive. It's very cool. You're very smart to get into this, and like you have good magical ability. 6 of them get picked. Only 5 survive. Like they're given like this task. Like only 5 of you are getting out and going into the society. 1 of you is dying. It's more dark academia. She plays with perspective a lot in this book, especially in the first book and like going out into the series. The first book, you're like in this little tiny bubble. Like there's only 6 people, 6 different characters who are so different and vastly different from each other. Like so unlikable to the point like where like you don't know who you want to like die and be booted out, and then you only see this little bubble. Like you don't see what's happening outside in the real world. The second one, it like flips that, and like the scope gets wider. I think it's just like a beautifully done like series. It's so different to like the other fantasies because like while there is like magical elements, you don't feel like it's that fantastical, and it's more like dark academia. But the next one is Babel by R. Kwong. This is also more historical fiction. We're in the 1800s. We follow Robin. Robin's from Canton. The magical elements aren't the main premise of this book because it's deeply rooted in like trying to critique academia and like exploitation of others. It's like the art of translation and like critiquing Western culture for like taking other cultures, and this book does such a good job of like exploring that. And I love R. Kwong's writing because it's so like goodly done. Goodly done? Is that how you say? Is that a thing? Goodly done. But I loved it. Characters are also really good too. We follow 4 different characters, but our main character is Robin. Oh, the fantastical element, I forgot to tell you. They're like in the translation like sector of Oxford. They're very well versed in like different languages, and so each of them has their own strengths. Like Robin's really good at Mandarin and Cantonese. The magic is in the College of Translation. They're like providing the power to the silver, like the translators, like the Babel College. Like they're powering the silver that powers the whole entire like city of London basically. So without them, London's nothing. It's phenomenal. Okay, just read it. Very character driven. The world is really like intricately done, but I don't think like it's like the most fantastical book. It's more like historical fiction, but like it's not focused on the fantasy. It's mostly focused on academia. Next is The Book of Night by Holly Black. I love Holly Black. A lot of people don't really like this one. It's set in modern day, like they have phones, they have cars, they drive cars, they have jobs, like you know what I mean? But I really loved it. The magical element is like it's magicians that work with shadows, and so they manipulate the shadows and stuff like that. And so our main character, Charlie Hall, she has been like working as like a thief for them basically, and so she's like trying to outgrow this lifestyle because she wants to get like be better in her life, and so she gets roped back into her like old ways. Follow what's happening and how she gets dragged back into this because of something that happens. I can't like say it without spoiling, but yeah, I just keep on saying blah 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 blah. Something happens and we're following what happens. I think the shadow aspect was really good and I love it. The little like, okay, it's not romance, I wouldn't say it's romance, but like the relationship in here, very good. Another character driven, like A Darker Shade of Magic. I have the original covers. I love the original covers. I'm not the biggest fan of the new covers, but whatever. This is A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. I really loved it. So we follow Kel, who's like he's not like a time traveler, but like he's a traveler, because in this universe, there's different like universes. So there's like Red London, Grey London, Black London, White London. Kel is from Red London, and then he meets this he meets somebody in his travels. Her name's Lila. The brotherly relationship between Kel and his brother in this, so good, so good, so good. And I feel like the world building was a little like intense for my little pea brain to handle, but once you get into it, it's very good. I love the story. Another character-driven fantasy is The Infernal Devices by Cassandra Clare. Okay, the Shadowhunter world, insane. There's 4 series in the Shadowhunter world altogether, and there's a couple of like other like standalone novellas types of things. But first is City of Bones, the Mortal Instruments trilogy. There's 6 books in this trilogy, and I feel like the world building in the first trilogy, City of Bones, City of Ashes, and City of Glass, truly like it builds on each other and it like establishes the Shadowhunter world. I do think you have to like absorb some like Mortal Instruments media, whether it be the TV show, the movie, or the books. I think it is critical before you get into the Infernal Devices. So either watch the show. First season's kind of crazy. It's like first season's kind of crazy in like a bad way. Like it's not like really well produced. But the second season, new weapons, like, and you get like a sense for like the whole entire world. Okay, I'm sorry. I have to establish that the characters and relationships within the Infernal Devices, top tier literature. Top tier literature. The love triangle goes crazy. Will, Jem, and Tessa, they go crazy. I don't think like the plot of these books are like that crazy. It's not like you don't get really confused, but like I think you go in for the characters, and so I love it because of that. I have another impromptu addition to the character-driven fantasies, which are The Raven Cycle by Maggie Stavoster. I don't know if that's how you say her name, but I love The Raven Cycle. So we follow 4 boys and a girl. We follow Blue, Gangsley, Noah, Adam, and Ronan. Gangsley is obsessed with like knowing this Welsh myth and like meeting that king. If he finds that king, he gets like a wish. I just think you have to go into it. It's like hard to explain, but I think the characters of this book really shine. Honestly, if I didn't like the characters, I wouldn't have finished the story, so that tells you a lot. Lastly, of the character driven, is it really a video if I don't talk about the Six of Crows duology? These characters, beautiful. Love these characters. I honestly don't think you have to read Shadow and Bone trilogy. I would honestly recommend the show if you really want to know what happens in the Shadow and Bone trilogy. But if you really are obsessed and you really want to know about it, you can read the books. First 3 books are so different from the Six of Crows writing and like the way the characters play out. These books are so good. They're so amazing. We follow 6 characters: Kaz, Nej, Nina, Matthias, Jesper, and Wylan. Yeah, we follow them. They go on heists. They're just very like, they're like the little like crooks of Ketterdam, and they're just like, I love them so much. It's character driven. The plot's really good. It's just phenomenal. Like it's just so good. And if you haven't read this, read it. Like, what are you doing here? Okay, actually, no, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to insult anybody. I know you're coming here for little recommendations, so there you go. Last but not least, I have a couple fantasy like adjacent recommendations. So first I have a sci-fi recommendation, which is the Red Rising saga. I've only read 3 of them so far, but I have 4. So this is the Red Rising saga by Pierce Brown. Red Rising was okay to me. The world building is a lot. It's like very hard to digest all this, like this whole science fiction world, but basically there's different categories of people, and so the golds are at the top and the reds are at the bottom, and so each category has like different like jobs within the universe. The golds are people from Earth who have migrated to the moon, and so like the moon's the home base. Like, different people inhabit different like planets and stuff like that, so it's very like there's a hierarchy, and the reds are at the bottom. And we follow Darrow. He's a red guy, and then something happens to him, and then yeah, characters are really like well thought out in the trilogy, and you really grow to like understand and love the world. I didn't really like the first one. The second and third ones loved. So, and then this is the 4th book, and there's 6 in total, I think. I don't know if there's gonna be more ever, but right now there's 6 published. Next is a magical realism book. I have magical realism is like very tricky because it is like kind of fantasy, but it's kind of not fantasy. It's just kind of like, what if this happened? I have 2 recommendations. I have The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Polston. I love The 7-Year Slip. This is very romance heavy. I think it's more like counted as like a romance book. I think the romance is really beautiful. We follow Clementine. Her aunt passes, so she's given her apartment, and so she's like in her apartment, and sometimes when she goes into the apartment, she is transported 7 years in the past, and so she meets this guy that's living in her aunt's apartment like for the time being, and she's like, whoa, who the heck are you? Why are you 7 years in the past? They form a connection. It's so cute. Something happens and they have to find their way back to each other. Very beautiful. I love it. It's so good. I actually do want to reread this now that I'm talking about it. It's so good. Like, you know when like a book is so good that you just want to reread it? Next one is Shark Heart by Emily Hebeck. This book is crazy. Like the premise and like the magical realism aspect of the book, insane. So good. Basically, in this world you can get like mutations, and then you turn into an animal of that mutation. There's a middle section of the book that I don't think is like very good, but I think like overall the book is really good. You feel for the characters and it's just really, it's nicely done magical realism. So yeah, there's that. Let me put my last book up here. Oh my god, that's so crazy. There's so many. There's actually so many. I ransacked my drawers clean, basically. I hope this helps anybody that wants to get into fantasy and some of my favorite recommendations. And I hope you guys enjoy like me breaking it down to what you kind of want in a fantasy. So if you're looking for like more character-driven fantasies, more romance-driven fantasies, I've got it all for you. I hope you enjoyed all my little recommendations. I haven't filmed a sit-down video like this besides wrap-ups like ever, except for like my tag, but like I don't really talk about like recommendations. I just talk about what I read. Thank you guys so much for listening to me rant about my some of my favorite fantasy books. I know like a lot of people have read a bunch of these, so it's not like very groundbreaking, but yeah, I'm recommending the books I like and the books I think other people will like. So thank you guys so much for watching. I love you guys, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.